Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I was the second gunman.
I'm Gary.
I'm Geoff.
And today we're taking a trip back to 1999 for eXistenZ. Ian, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, the story follows Jennifer Jason Leigh and Jude Law. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays Allegra Geller, a game designer who has created a new game called eXistenZ. She is almost assassinated at the start of the movie, and Jude Law, playing a security guard, takes it upon himself to protect her. We then follow them through the movie as they try to attempt to rescue Allegra's game.
Death to the demoness Allegra Geller. No!
This is a very bizarre film from a very bizarre director. David Cronenberg, who's made such films as The Fly,
Yep.
Shivers, Crash,
Rabid.
I mean, his entire repertoire of films, every single one of them is enough to make you just cringe with the things that you're watching. And this film also came out at an interesting time as well, in 1999, just before the millennium, just before technology was about to wipe us out.
Yeah.
We also had a film called The Matrix, which pretty much almost changed society, especially with the way that they look at video games, or if they look at virtual reality,
Yeah.
or special effects in movie making, and all those other things that The Matrix gave us in the year 2000. eXistenZ takes a slightly different look at video games and what they mean to the players at the time, and perhaps what they could still mean today to modern day gamers.
It's funny because I remember this film when it first came out, and like you said, The Matrix came out just before, just after, and completely eclipsed eXistenZ. But weirdly enough, I kind of enjoy eXistenZ more, mainly because I'm a big David Cronenberg fan anyway. I love the idea behind Rabid. The Fly remake is absolutely amazing, and his weird view on flesh really comes to life in this movie, because I mean, we're not messing around with green screen or CGI. We have these game pods that are alive.
They're like fleshy sacks that just sit on your lap or just sit next to you.
There's more wobbly rubber prosthetics than like in like a dildo shop, you know?
Yeah.
It's just wobbling everywhere.
But
It's very tactile. I mean, they sort of rub, knobs and buttons and fleshy grooves on it, and the film does have quite a varied design. Especially, you see all the different versions that they've had, and some people have got their own custom modded ones.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, could you really imagine that being the interface that you would operate a game with?
To be honest, the most offensive thing about them was that they were flesh coloured.
Yeah.
I thought, I was like, if those game pods were black, like your Xbox or your PlayStation, they wouldn't be so bad. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's a game. That was a bit weird looking, but it's a kind of futuristic design, organic looking design game
I think
console.
it's the fact that it plugs into your spine. The fact that you have to have an operation that will implant this device into the base of your back, into your spine, so that you can then plug it in. Instead of a USB device, it's like a fleshy umbilical cord.
Umbilical cord. But then that whole kind of basically the connection with the Matrix was very similar. Like you get plugged into your spine in the Matrix,
into your neck,
and they're actually cocooned in this like womb-like thing in the Matrix. And so instead, you're like plugging into this fleshy wobbly thing, and it's an umbilical cord going into your spine. But clearly, the reference to plugging into the womb is like really overt and obvious.
What I think is brilliant about this film is obviously we're talking 1999. We're now in 2015, and you look at the devices we have now, like the head mask,
the Oculus Rift,
And you put these things on, and people are immersed into this world. And as soon as the word of mouth gets around it, this is like the next big thing. If somebody came out tomorrow and said, "I've made this fleshy looking pod, it plugs safely into your spinal column, and you are completely immersed in a completely realistic world," people would be rushing to the stores in droves to pick up these things.
I feel just like me. Is that kind of transition normal? That kind of smooth interlacing from place to place?
It depends on the style of game.
At the same time, the story develops where, you know, you have that other element. You have the people who don't think it's such a good idea, that it's going to destroy the world more than it's going to change it. And so you always have this underlying feature in the film that the game developer is going to be killed. And it's funny because reading up on the notes for eXistenZ, Cronenberg did an interview with Salman Rushdie, who is a very famous writer who wrote a book called The Satanic Verses and was threatened with death from Islamic extremists. And so obviously Cronenberg has adapted that story where you have this person creating this thing and then people going out to kill God, as Willem Dafoe calls them.
Thou, the player of the game, art God. Very spiritual. Funny, too. God, the artist. The mechanic.
Inadvertently, yeah, they're kind of connecting almost virtual reality and religion, because you're getting all that kind of questioning of the nature of reality.
Yeah.
And then also the creator of the game is kind of God type thing, or the creator or the player, depending on your opinion. But as a film, it's really like disjointed, isn't it? It's really like, what is going on?
Yeah. Well, that's because the characters in this film are not sure what they're doing.
No.
Which he asks her near the beginning of the film, what's the point of this game? How... And she literally just turns to him and says, well, in order to figure that out, you have to play it. Could you imagine sitting down and playing Call of Duty or the next Halo game and just going, yeah, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'll just play it and find out.
You say that, but that's crazy, because it's the same thing I thought of when I first started playing Skyrim. You get the same thing with Skyrim and Fallout and all these immersive RPG games where you literally step out after the tutorial and here's this massive world. Go and do whatever you want. There are set missions, and like with the eXistenZ game, you know, you have to talk to NPCs in a particular way to progress the story, or you could just leave them in a game loop and go off and eat mutants.
So the film, for me's biggest strength is exploring the kind of virtual reality that we are, you know, aiming towards with the idea of the holodeck from Star Trek.
Yeah.
And the sort of thing that fascinates me is that whole society breaking down when if we have heaven as technology at our fingertips and we can go into it and experience all of these programs that all of these other gods have created in its own sense, there'd be no reason to ever want to be in your normal body to go and do everyday, normal, boring things when Ashley says in the film, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
But aren't you more interested in finding out what's going to happen next in this catered to story?
Yeah.
And so there becomes like a divide between the people that are reality purists and those that just want the pure escapism. And so I think as an idea and concept, those are great to think about.
Yeah.
But it's a subject that the film only really lightly goes into whilst it's throwing horrible special effects in your face. Yeah. And I have to say that with The Matrix, the special effects are bloated and in your face, but they really do serve to tell the story. In eXistenZ, the special effects are there in almost every scene, but you're not always aware that it's a special effect, especially like when they're at the back of the Chinese restaurant, or that they're in the warehouse, and you see all of these bizarre sort of amphibious creatures, all of the autopsy scenes. All of those are special effects, but they actually fit and blend in with the world almost seamlessly. Yeah. Other than you getting that feeling of, is this reality or is this like Inception where they've gone how many games deep?
Yeah, see, that's it. I wanted to bring that up. I from 1999, we were this film was doing Inception before Inception was cool. You know, going within a game, within a game, within a game, and you're just like, yeah. Where the fuck am I? You know, are we still playing
Cronenberg handles it very well for the most part, but I have to say, I enjoyed the film for the first half. The second half of the film really starts to get quite ropey, and it starts to get real loose with its concepts.
Yeah, but I would only say, would you agree that maybe it's because you've seen the film once before? The first time if you've never seen eXistenZ before, you might get a lot out of it, and it might blow up some ideas in your head that you never thought before. But if you've seen it before, not much has really changed. You know, if you remember the ending, it's still there.
there's only so many interesting points for me in the film, and they are all character pieces. They come across Willem Dafoe at a gas station, and his character name is Gas. He sets up the bioport in Jude Law's character so that he can experience the game with her. However, that turns out to have been a defective one, so they kill off Gas, and then they go and find Ian Holmes' character.
Yeah.
And he inadvertently ends up implanting him with a virus, which then ends up breaking down his implant, or breaks the game, which then results in the Cylon turning up in an army uniform, and it turns into Call of Duty finale. So there's not really that much that happens throughout the film other than these small character pieces. The interesting points for me are when the characters are discussing things that are still perhaps relevant to today and today's gamers.
Unformed world whose rules and objectives are largely unknown, seemingly indecipherable, or even possibly non-existent. Always on the verge of being killed by forces that we don't understand.
I think that it is kind of really fairly superficial plot premises in which they get to have lines of dialogue which are really obviously kind of philosophical statements.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, this was set in 1999, and I know it's only like 15, 16 years ago, but it was at a period when, you know, gaming was just about to really explode, you know? I mean, it was becoming a big market. It had really kind of taken off through the 90s.
It was the PlayStation that really, and Nintendo, obviously.
So, I mean, in some ways, eXistenZ captures the zeitgeist of the time and people's kind of fears about virtual reality and also this kind of big, you know, like holographic universe kind of philosophical thinking sort of all coming together in the mindset of people in the time. And as like a film, like you say, like the performances are really what are meant to carry it, and the delivery of those lines. With The Matrix, there's loads to distract you, but with eXistenZ, you are actually much more focused on the characters. And I don't necessarily think the performances from Jude Law or Jennifer Leigh, is it?
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
I don't know if they were necessarily good enough. They're a little bit wooden. It's kind of explained in the game or in the film, because they are game characters.
Yeah.
And so they're also sort of forced into... It kind of has a little Destiny twist where there's just enough choice to keep it interesting as a line in the film. But they go into moments where they sort of just do stuff compulsively, automatically, without even really thinking.
Because it's a part of the game's programming.
Yeah. And so, you know, like the woodenness of their characters is kind of a little bit supported. But at the same time, you're trying to watch this film to sort of enjoy it as well, you know. And it doesn't create such an enjoyable to watch experience, I don't think, because they are kind of, there's this disjointed connection between like reality and the characters that you are seeing on the film, and you do feel that all the way through the film.
What happened?
It's your character who said it. It's kind of a schizophrenic feeling, isn't it? You'll get used to it.
I was really quite put off by the sexual overtones that come through this film. Right from the beginning, he talks about having a fear of being penetrated by anything, especially into the base of his spine.
I have that fear.
Yeah. And especially when that hole in his back kind of looks like a sexual hole.
Yeah.
It's an anus.
There's a lot of lubricating, there's a lot of squelchy noises, and there's fingering and licking, and a lot of orgasmic sort of reactions to the insertion of these pods.
See, now,
lots of nipple tweaking to start the game as well.
Being a Cronenberg
So
film, though,
You kind of expect it in a Cronenberg film, especially after the things like Crash. Does it detract from the film too much? No, I think it's more like, I think it's pretty much just a humorous overtone that's just kind of there. it just kind of makes me giggle and chuckle when they have these sort of innuendos when they have some of these comments, especially when you're looking at this fleshy sack, and the fact that they can all hook up to it at once as well. It's just
massively multiplayer. That's what I really like about that game. You know,
it's just an orgy. It's old school MMO. That's what it is.
I mean, this is the thing that got me. It's like they start off in that church, and you just see everybody just sitting around. Obviously, it's a focus group to try and work on the game. But I could never shake the image of, you know, imagine going around your friend's house going, yeah, I bought my port, I bought my biopod, bought my port, plug in. You know, it's kind of like mixing drugs and gaming into just one big thing, because Jennifer Jason Leigh, she kind of has this euphoric, you know, drug attitude towards it. She can't get enough of it. She's always wanting to plug in, you know, and then when she comes out of it, she's all delirious and, you know, unsure of what's going on. It's really weird.
What the hell was that?
I think my favourite scene in the film, but I think I have two. I really do like the manufacturing of the flesh gun in the Chinese restaurant. I mean, just when he's aiming it at her and it's just dripping from the barrel. I'm just like, I mean, I'm trying to get away from these sexual overtones yet again, but
a big bone dripping from the end,
big
you know.
dripping bone holding it to her face.
It reminds me of a game called Shadow of the Damned, where your actual weapon in that game was a boner.
Taste my big boner!
But other than that Chinese restaurant scene, which I think is the most famous scene from the film, I like the scene where they're at the video game store.
Yeah.
And it's the scene where you get introduced to characters being stuck on a loop. And for me, it just reminds me of video games that have crashed or broken, or in those instances, and when they're sort of talking to each other whilst the character's just stuck in an animation loop.
Yeah.
It reminded me of games like Phantasmagoria, when you just left your character on the screen, and of course it was all FMV videos, so they would just be stuck on a 3-second loop forever until you clicked on the next item. So I got a good, genuine laugh out of that scene.
My favourite scene is Willem Dafoe's scene. It just seems Willem Dafoe is an absolute amazing actor anyway, and turning up in this weird film, his character seems to just take weird to 12. You know, he's there, and obviously they're conversing with him about getting an illegal port, and he pretends that he doesn't know anything about it. Then he starts worshipping Allegra Geller's feet, you know, and then they obviously have the whole operation scene with Jude Law, and it's just the thought, you know, he sticks that thing to his back and he fires it. And then it's like, yeah, now we're going to get the big one out. You know, I'm going to slap this to your back. And I'm like, okay.
I didn't expect that to hurt. I expect the next part to hurt.
Well, my favourite scene is not actually... It's sort of really two scenes. It's the end of one scene and the beginning of another. And it kind of highlighted for me the way the game is... the film which is basically gaming you. It kind of highlighted that exactly that point, really, that the filmmaker was just trying to fuck with the audience. They're in this sort of warehouse bit at the back of the game shop, and they start getting hot and steamy, and it's a really sort of erotic, raunchy scene. And in that scene, you know, like, I get the sense that Jennifer Leigh really actually wants to fuck Jude Law, like, in real life, because she is absolutely, like, you can tell she is absolutely loving it, and all of a sudden it just cuts, and then you're at the trout farm. So you go from really raunchy, kind of erotic, and they're like, yeah, hot and steamy, to like sloppy, horrible,
mutant
rubbery, bloody mutant fish, guts all coming out, and it's all like really sweaty and gross and dirty. And so that is pretty much like what this film is. It's just like erotic filth. That's what it is.
Erotic filth.
Like sandwiched together like that with some sort of spurious plot about, virtual reality and God.
I'm surprised then that I don't enjoy this film more, because, to be fair, halfway through this film, I got bored. towards the end of this film, I was just frustrated. I was kind of annoyed with the whole premise. A lot of people have gone on to say that this film is pretty much anti-gamer. And that there's the whole movement in the film where they are the reality purists. And so they go around killing gamers or game designers, as much as I'd like to go and turn up at Randy Pitchford's office and blast him with a fleshy boner gun. I kind of feel a real disconnect between Cronenberg and this film with myself, especially being a really big gamer. I kind of felt like I was being put down for my past, one of my favourite pastimes. I also think that the film is a little bit weak in terms of it has no real driving force to the narrative. The actors and the characters are fumbling through scenes, not aware of what's going to happen next, and the unexpectedness of the ending when it does just come out of nowhere, when the room pretty much explodes and bombs are going off everywhere, it was enough to jolt me back into the film again, because I was done with that at that point. I like the concepts and the ideas that are there. I just don't think that it lends itself too well to storytelling. But I do recommend that you watch the film if you've never seen it before. It's a great idea. It's a great film to look at for all of these ideas. However, it's a slow-paced film, and there's not, I would say, enough to engross you the entire time.
See, I partially agree as well. If you've never seen eXistenZ...
Wait a minute. You preferred eXistenZ to The Matrix.
Yeah.
How can you put this film down afterwards?
Well, I'm not putting it down. eXistenZ is a good film if you've never seen it. But if you've already seen it, then you know what to expect. And that not much has really changed. And the only reason you would go back and watch this film again more than once is if you're a big David Cronenberg fan. I would obviously suggest Rabid is better, and so is The Fly. I wouldn't go so far for Crash. But eXistenZ is a fun film for the obvious reason. If you've never seen it, it does have some unique ideas, some unique views on gaming in the future. It does, and like I said, doesn't work.
See, I actually think it's proper sci-fi. Alright, so it kind of is offensive to gamers in a sense, but that's because it's asking a hard question. What if virtual reality was so good you can't distinguish between life and reality? When does virtual reality end? When does the game end? And there's quite a few of these kind of philosophical questions throughout the film, but I think that it does kind of the thing that eXistenZ does is highlight the danger of that, the potential danger of that.
Yeah.
Better than the Matrix or whatever, because in the Matrix it was really obvious. You're in the Matrix because you can go boom.
That was my joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but at the same time, we've seen virtual realities and holodecks in Star Trek, but society hasn't broken down to that extent. We even in Red Dwarf, we get to see them coming out of their virtual reality programs.
But like we said, eXistenZ is the only film to go to that length. We've had all these good sides of all these good games. Now we see the bad side.
Star Trek has a very kind of positive view of the future in general, anyway. So this is, it's a bit like Alien was to space. It's like, what if when we're in space it's just horrible and dirty, and what if when we're doing virtual reality it's just a horrible, confusing headfuck? And that, it's good for that. And I definitely recommend that if you've never seen eXistenZ, absolutely watch eXistenZ. It's really unusual experience. It's a little bit dated, little bit, but the questions are still relevant today, and that's the main thing. But after that, it's not a particularly enjoyable film to watch. It's just kind of...
Or to rewatch.
Yeah, or to rewatch. It's kind of a bit grimy. But if you don't know, how the twists are going to roll out, or you'll know there's twists, but... if you don't know how they're going to roll out, there's genuinely stuff that's interesting, and you'll be like, asking what's going on. You will spend most of your time watching the film confused, expect that, But ultimately, it is quite an enjoyable experience, and it'll make you think about things in a slightly different way. You'll get to see things through the eyes of David Cronenberg anyway for a bit, and that's
worth a trip in its own right.
It's an experience, even if it's not a particularly nice one. So,
thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.